Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. And we're having this afternoon a webinar on the informative Annex ZA for the Machinery Directive. You are many today to follow us, so welcome everybody, and we hope this webinar will be useful for you. My name is Els, and I will be moderating the webinar in the background. This is the case for many of the webinars that CEN and CENELEC organize. You will all be muted during the webinar because you're so many, we cannot allow you to talk one by one, but we do invite you to use the Q&A panel should you have any questions. There are several speakers looking at your questions during the presentation, so please feel free to enter your questions and we will reply as many of the questions as possible. Should your question remain unreplied today, please don't worry, because we intend to make a Q&A report available where we will have all questions and the answers in one single file. You will be triggered and informed when the report is available. The webinar has been recorded as well, and we will also provide you later today with the recording and the presentation that will be shown. Should you be on Twitter, please feel free to talk about this webinar. We at CEN CENELEC are at Standards for EU, and we have a hashtag dedicated for trainings called Training for Standards. So, without going in many details, I would like to overview together with you the agenda of today. So it's 2 o'clock. We're starting with the introduction and some practicalities. We have Mr. Frank Woensland, who is the CEN CENELEC Sector Rapporteur on Machinery, and Mr. Peter Broertjes, EC Policy Officer for Machinery, who will do some welcoming words and remarks for you. My colleagues, Hugo and Joanna, are sitting together at the CEN CENELEC Meeting Center, providing you with an explanation of the CEN and CENELEC instructions on the informative Annex Z for Machinery Directive. We plan to have a little break in between, as you can see. And after that, Aline Vecchia and Catherine Lubinon from AFNOR UNM will talk to you through drafting a detailed informative Annex Z under Machinery Directive in practice. And they have also a little quiz for you prepared. We have some time at the end for questions and answers, and there is a closing from the CEN CENELEC Sector Rapporteur Machinery, Frank Woensland, at the end. So, as promised, we're recording the webinar. Should you miss a part or you are not able to join from the beginning, you can look back at it via the CEN CENELEC website. So, without further ado, I would like to hand over now to Mr. Frank Woensland and Mr. Peter Broertjes to do the welcoming. Let me stop sharing my screen. There you go.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me properly. As Els already said in her very nice introduction, my name is Frank Woensland. I'm working with the VDMA, the German Engineering Federation. I was appointed CEN CENELEC's rapporteur for machinery on 1st of June this year as the successor of my predecessor, Dr. Gerhard Steiger, who retired from this job end of May. And it's really an honor for me to introduce this welcoming session, to welcome all of you to this hopefully very informative and very constructive seminar on the Annex Z. And I do not want to lose too many words at the very beginning. So let me just say a few, introductory remarks. And when I was asked to do the welcoming, the first thing that came to my mind was actually, everybody might ask himself, why are we holding this seminar on the informative Annex Z, given that the rules for the Annex Z are probably known to most standardizers, to most people active in the standardization field, especially in the context of the Machinery Directive. So why do we have to do this exercise now? What is is there so much added value with it? And I personally think, yes, there is. And to underline this a little bit, I'd like to briefly recall the relevance and the importance of the Annex Z in the context of our harmonized standardization world. We all know without a legally sound Annex Z, there is actually, as a matter of fact, no harmonization possible of a standard. The Annex Z constitutes the link between the directives in general, in our case in particular the Machinery Directive, and the technical solutions that are laid down in the standards. And as we all noticed, at least those of us who have been active in this field over the last couple of years, the understanding of that role of the Annex Z has significantly changed over the years. While in the past, for many of us, it used to be a purely informative element. It still is called informative Annex Z. Some, how should I say, some exercise that you had to do in addition to writing the standard. It has become a legally relevant part, actually. So it is of enormous importance. Without a legally sound Annex ZA, no harmonized standard. It's as simple as that, actually. And what we also noticed is that, again, as many of you may probably know, there have been many rejections of harmonized standards over the last couple of years. It has been the number of standards that successfully achieved their harmonization was sometimes frustratingly low. And one of the main reasons for such non-compliances was very often the non-compliance of a standard with the requirements given for the Annex Z. There was usually quite a variety of mistakes that we found, some of them more formal, some of them more really, I'm not saying technical, but more with the content of the Annex Z. So for that reason, it is really very important to always reiterate, to repeat the importance and also the content and what is expected in such an Annex Z. Hugo, can you go one slide forward, please? Thank you. And so this very moment to us seemed to be a very good moment, actually, because as it is known to all of us, the HAS system, the system of the harmonized standard consultants, who play a preeminent role in checking whether a harmonized standard candidate complies with the rules or not. The system had been suspended during almost all of our year 2022 due to the change of the contract. So hardly any activities in the standardization field were possible, or at least all these activities were stopped at the moment when the HAS assessment was due. And now, right now, the system is restarting. The contracts have been signed. And at the same time, we know that the Machinery Directive is being revised. It undergoes a revision. It will be replaced by a new machinery regulation. And in the context of that, there will be a huge task ahead of us, because certainly an enormous number of standards will probably have to be brought in shape with regard to the Annex Z. And much, as I said, much of this work has therefore to do with this annex. And the success and the speed of this whole exercise really depends on the quality of the Annex Z. It may not be the only reason why sometimes the assessments that we experienced were negative, but it usually played a very, very big role. So the task and the purpose of this seminar is certainly to contribute to a better understanding for those among us who are not yet familiar with the system. There may be many new people in the field of machinery standardization, but at the same time also serve as a reminder and refresh the knowledge of people who already knew about many of the details, but may still have some doubts how to approach that whole topic, how to set up an Annex ZA in such a shape that it complies with all the rules that have been given there. So with that, I'd already like to close my introductory words. I wish all of us, especially all of you, a very constructive, interesting, and helpful seminar on the Annex Z. And I happily hand over to Peter Proteus, the desk officer for the Machinery Directive in the Commission, who will also say a few words to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank. And I assume that you can also hear me well. I'm Peter Broertjes. I work for the European Commission, and I'm responsible for machinery and equipment policy of the Commission. And in fact, Frank has already highlighted all the important messages, I think, that we want to pass. So for the moment, indeed, we have the Machinery Directive. It's 2006-42 for those that enjoy nitty-gritty details. And the Annex Z is I would say, it's the link. It's the before missing link. It has been introduced, and it is really an essential link between the Machinery Directive and the essential health and safety requirements and an harmonized standard. So as Frank has also already highlighted, it became yeah, it has developed due to a legal concern, because the harmonized standard before, they were covering everything, but it wasn't tied to the specific regulatory requirements. And to give complete legal certainty, which is very important for you as the end user, and also member states for the implementation of checking that all the machines that are put on the market comply. So this legal certainty is of utmost important. That brings a responsibility that the links should be really strong. And this is why we are emphasizing through this webinar what you can do to make this the strongest link possible right from the start, so that we can implement or publish the harmonized standards so that they will become a part of the Machinery Directive. So I cannot stress enough, and everybody in the call, I think in this webinar will do the same. It is really, really important that Annex Z is good. Frank also mentioned that we are currently working on a revision of the Machinery Directive, and it is the new machinery regulation. The machinery regulation will bring new requirements for you, new obligations, I should say. And it is now, unfortunately, a little bit too early to give you all the details about what's coming. And furthermore, I could fill probably the whole time slot for this entire seminar with information. It is not possible because it's still going through the final stages of negotiation with the European Parliament and the member states in the Council. And what will come out of it? I mean, we have, of course, we know what will come out of it, but there are a few key items, which is a finalization, for instance, of the standard the standard request that we will have to issue to CEN CENELEC, among others, for delivering updated standards. And also, we don't know yet what the final timing will be. And this timing is important for you and me, and also CEN CENELEC, because it will dictate at the rate of speed that we will have to work. Now, what is essential is, if you create new harmonized standards, that they are good, and so that they can be accepted. It's not rocket science, to be completely honest. I say this a little bit lightly, but it doesn't have to be very difficult, but you would have to address it rigorously, or I'm not even sure if that's the right word, but you have to address it very, very structured way. And that, I think, is only the secret behind it. And I think that this secret will be unveiled to you in the course of this webinar. So I want to thank you on behalf of the Commission and my department, and as being responsible for the Machinery and Equipment Directive, the Machinery Directive and machinery equipment in general. I also thank you personally for your efforts to create very good, robust, standardized, harmonized standards. And I'm here for you today also to answer questions if you have them with relating to this work. And other than that, I wish you all the best for this great webinar. And I look really forward to seeing your interaction. So thank you. And yeah, I'll be watching. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter and Frank, for your interventions. My name is Hugo Dourado, and together with my colleague Joanna Frankowska, we will go through the explanation of the CEN and CENELEC instructions on the informative Annex Z for the Machinery Directive. So I would like to start. Sorry. I would like to start this topic by presenting the BT decisions that were in the origin of our presentation. As you can see in this slide, decision BT C036-2020 on CEN side and the decision D171-C076 on CENELEC side state that BT, after noting that one of the most common reasons for the lack of compliance was connected with issues in Annex Z, and that the Sector Forum had already developed a set of instructions which were agreed with the European Commission, BT decided to approve this guidance and asked CEN and CENELEC BTs to comply with the instructions for preparing the Annex Z. And it was also decided that CCMC should make these instructions available and on CEN and CENELEC BOS. As you can see, these are part of the decisions of the BT. Now, on the next two slides, we want to show you where you can find the correct template and instructions for both CEN. Here, CEN, you can find it in CEN BOS. You just need to follow the provided link, and then in the bottom you will see exactly the correct template and the instructions that we are presenting now. For CENELEC, it's the same procedure, but you need to go to CENELEC BOS following the provided link, and also at the bottom of the page, together with the correct template, you will find the instructions. Here. Now, we will guide you through the first point of the instruction. This first point concerns the application of the correct template of the Annex Z. This template was agreed with the European Commission, so this gives us already a good base to start from. There are two aspects that I would really like to highlight. First is that only relevant essential requirements should be indicated, and that Type B standards don't need to indicate essential requirements that aren't covered. Okay. Now, I will show you two examples concerning point 1 and 6 of the instruction. But for that, we prepared a small exercise. I will give you some moments to check what's wrong with this table. Then we will proceed. Yes, you are correct. In the first column, it's missing the relevant before the essential requirements. So this has to be done this way. And on point 6, it states that we shouldn't refer to not relevant, only to the relevant essential requirements. Again, another exercise. I will give you also some moments to try to understand what's not correct in this table, and then we will proceed with it. Okay, I hope you managed to find the mistake here, and it's the expression partially covered. This is something that we should not use, we should avoid, because either the essential requirement should be indicated as not covered, or if it's covered, you just leave this the third column blank. Now, concerning the point 2 of the instruction, this point it's related with the request that we got from the Commission not to refer, at least in the Annex Z, to other standards or legislation. As you can see in this letter that we received, the European Commission is informing us that they will not cite the standard if this happens. Again, I will have a short exercise to discover what's wrong in this table. Yes, as you could see, there's a reference to legislation in the last row of the column, and this is not correct. This shouldn't be here. So the correct way would be to finish the table without the final row. And if other links to standards are necessary, they should be done according to the CEN and CENELEC internal regulations part 3, which should be done in the forward or via the normative references. Now, I would like to refer to two warnings that we also think are important. And I have two examples now in the next two slides. The first warning is the following. When dealing with an essential requirement, like the one you see in the picture, 1.2, control systems, or others that have similar configuration with like a main title and then other sub clauses, please don't refer to this essential requirement by the main title, because then you will be including all the sub clauses of this essential requirement and not only the ones you wish to cover. Okay. The second warning is that when you're covering an essential requirement, if a certain clause of a standard in its totality is dedicated to cover it, then you can refer to the generic clause number. If not, the detailed subclause must be indicated, like the example you can see in the slide. In this case, all the subclauses of clause 4.2 deal with the essential requirements. So then it can be used as a generic indication. Otherwise, you need to make it more detailed. Okay, so my colleague Joanna will continue from this point on. Thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joanna Frankowska. I'm a project manager for machinery. Thank you very much, Ugo. So now I will present the next items of the instruction. Can you hear me well?
Yes, all fine.
Okay, thank you. So I will move to the item 4, which asks to use the wording of the use the wording in the Annex ZA in the way that it is exactly given in the template. So to not change anything in the text that is above the table, in the table, or below the table. So now I will also give you some time to identify what is wrong in this table on the top of the slide. So I hope that you have identified very well that this sentence here is not correct because it doesn't come from the template. It was something that was added by the TC. So again, don't add anything. Now I will move to the item 5 of the instruction, and this item asks to apply the correct order of the columns in the table of the Annex ZA or ZZ in CENELEC. So again, I would like to ask you to identify what is wrong in this table, which is here below. So I can imagine that many of you could identify that the order of the first column of the table was exchanged incorrectly with the second column. the order should be in line with the template that the column with the essential requirement always comes as the first one. Then the second one is always the one dedicated to the clauses, and then the third column is dedicated to remarks. So item 6 was already covered by my colleague Ugo. So again, to explain you that these numbers that you can see, they reflect the numbers that are given in the instruction, but we have sometimes grouped these items in a bit different way for the purpose of this webinar. So now let's move to the item 7 of the instruction. This item requires to always provide the numbers of the essential requirement, and similarly, it is also required to provide the numbers of the clauses. So now I will again give you some moments to guess what is wrong here in this table. You may remember that in the past, a few years ago, it was possible to write in a general way in the informative Annex Z for machinery, like you can see here, that all essential requirements are covered except some of them, or all normative clauses, or all normative clauses except some of them, but this is no longer allowed. So we should always indicate the concrete numbers of the essential requirements and of the clauses, as it is shown as an example here below. Now, the item 8, it's about some points of the Annex 1 of the Machinery Directive, which are not the real essential requirements. They are included in this Annex 1, but in de facto they're about definitions. So because of that, they should not be indicated in the first column of the Annex Z or anywhere in the Annex Z. So these points are 111, 311, and 411. These are about definitions, so do not indicate them in the Annex Z table. Now I will move to the special essential requirement 112, which is dedicated to the principles of safety integration. Why is it special? It's because it is written in a general way, whereas these aspects that are covered are dealt with more in detail in further essential requirements. And because of this specificity, there were different interpretations on how to deal with it among the technical bodies and among the consultants. And at certain point of time, the CEN CENELEC Sector Forum on Machinery concluded that it's important to install consistency how to deal with it. So together with the Commission, it was agreed how to address this essential requirement to install some coherence. So first of all, now I will explain the first column of the table. So here, very exceptionally, that is different than for all other essential requirements. For this one, it is necessary to indicate the respective letters, indents, in the first column. So, but you have to remember to never indicate the indent B, because B is about risk assessment, and this is about procedural aspect. And for the European Commission, it was very important because of that to not indicate it in the first column, because it's not about some product requirements, it's about procedural aspect. aspects. So this is why in the first column, you can only indicate A, C, D, and E, but depending whether these indents are relevant for the product in the scope of the standard. So that was for the first column. Now I will move to the second column. Here, on a bit in the opposite way, it was agreed to indicate only general numbers of the clauses, big numbers, like 4, 5, and 6. So without indicating the subclauses. So the numbers which should be indicated here are the ones which correspond to the clauses dealing with safety requirements, protective risk reduction measures, verification of these, or information for use. Usually, these are the numbers 4, 5, and 6, but please be careful because it's not always the case. This depends on the structure of your particular standard. So these numbers can be different. So the conclusion is that it's not correct just to copy paste the addressing of this essential requirements, how you see it on this slide. This is the example, and to always check which letters of the essential requirement are relevant for the product in the scope of your standard, and then what is the structure of the standard to know which numbers should be indicated in the second column. Okay, that was a bit complex one, but now let's move to the item 10 of the instruction. So this point requires that in the second column of the table, it's about the second column dedicated to the clauses, only these clauses that are normative and deal with significant hazards and contain verifiable requirements can be mentioned. So again, I will give you some time to identify what is wrong in this example that you see. So I guess that many of you guessed well that it's not correct to indicate the clause 1, which is always about the scope, because the scope doesn't contain any requirements. So never indicate 1 in the second column. Then, secondly, it's always not correct to indicate the number of the general sentence which is given in many harmonized standards under Machinery Directive, because it is coming from the CEN Guide 414, the sentence that you can see here. So it's okay to indicate the sentence in the standard. However, as you can see, this sentence doesn't deal with concrete verifiable requirements or significant hazards. So if you have such a sentence, which is fine in your standard, please make sure to not indicate it in the second column. And if in this clause 5.1, below such a general sentence, you deal with some concrete hazards, significant hazards, and that contain also you have the clauses that contain verifiable requirements, then you should indicate them in separate sub-clauses. And then you indicate in the second column only the numbers for these separate sub-clauses. So here, for this general sentence that you see on the screen, you could give the number 5.1.1, and that you don't indicate it in the Annex Z, whereas these clauses dealing with concrete requirements, you include in separate other sub-clauses, for example, 5.1.2, 5.1.3, which you indicate in the second column. And here below, you can see the correct example of dealing with the essential requirement. Now, I would like to address some other aspects relating in particular with the work which is carried out together with our colleagues from the international standardization organizations, so ISO and IEC, who I know that also are here today with us in this webinar. And I would like to highlight that even if it's quite often that some standards are developed under ISO or IEC lead, the responsibility and the ownership for these matters that relate to the compliance with the EU legislation, including the Annex Z, is within the European technical body, so CEN TC and CENELEC TC. So it's very important that European technical body is there and monitors, ensures that Annex Z is developed, supports its development, on drafts the Annex Z if necessary, of course in cooperation with the international technical body, because this is not the exercise that can be done in isolation. Therefore, good cooperation between European and international technical body is key. I would also like to remind about quite recent decision of the CEN technical board. Now, these three slides are relevant only for CEN, for the normative references, dating of normative references. In CENELEC, there is a separate annex for this. Through this decision that you can, the reference of which you can see on the screen, CEN technical board, first of all, confirmed that the best option is to date normative references in the main body of the ISO standard. It's because if this is done like this, then it is ensured that the CEN standard and the ISO standard are identical. However, if CEN and ISO TCs prefer, it is also possible to have a normative reference undated in the main body of the standard, and to date such a normative reference via the Annex ZA. There is a dedicated table, ZA2, that serves for this purpose. And here on the screen, you have also the links to the template of this table and the guidance document, as well as the link to the webinar that explains this matter. Here again, there's a print screen of our publicly available so-called BOSS web page, where you can see where to find this template and guidance. And finally, the extract of such a table ZA2 to show you the example how this is done in practice. Finally, as you may know, there are some other items of the instruction, in particular, concretely numbers 11 and 12. So 12 is dedicated to very limited number of TCs. It's about globally relevant standards. So therefore, we will not deal with this topic now today. Item 11 is relevant for a bigger number of TCs. It's about 30% of all standards. It's about so-called multi-part series. However, given that it doesn't concern all the standards. We have decided to deal with this matter via the dedicated podcast that my colleague Ugo prepared. And here you see the link to this podcast. So those of you that are impacted, you are very welcome to hear this podcast about this particular case, so multi-part series. So that was the last slide from my part, and now I would like to give the screen to my colleagues, but first I think we'll have coffee break, right, Alice?
Yes, I think indeed that on the program we had a little break. Let me double check how long we planned that. Oop.
I think
Sorry.
10 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. Let's then reconvene at 2:50, so 10 minutes before we come back. Okay, welcome back everybody. I'm happy to see that the almost 300 attendees today are still connected. So as we've seen the instructions on Annex ZA and ZZ with my colleagues, I'm happy to continue with how this goes in practice. So I have the pleasure to invite or to have with us today the expertise of Aline Vecchia and Catherine Lubineau, who are here to guide you through what is this going, how is this going on in practice. So please, Aline and Catherine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alice. So I hope you hear us. So I'm Catherine Lubineau, so working for AFNOR, so the French standardization organization, and we are especially dedicated on mechanical engineering aspects. And Aline, my colleague, she is a secretary of many working groups and also technical committees at European level. So now that we have been aware of the rules for drafting an Annex Z for standards for Machinery Directive, let's begin a sequence on a practical exercise. An important aspect to take into account is that it's important to begin the work as soon as possible in the development of your draft standard. So as Peter Broch said at the beginning of this meeting, it facilitates the work and allows you to have a clear flow on the content of this Annex ZA. So for an optimized way of working within the working group and within the group that will prepare this Annex Z, the best is to elaborate this annex with experts of the working groups and at least with 3 persons. 1 person with the guide to the Machinery Directive, to the application of the Machinery Directive, 1, of course, with the standard, and a 3rd one to complete the Annex Z. So at least 1 expert, the convener of the working group or the project leader and the secretary of the working group. That's important to have those people to make sure that we have consistency between the content of the Machinery Directive and also the content of the standard, and it allows to review all the aspects of the standard. Why do we recommend using the guide rather than the Machinery Directive itself? So of course, the Machinery Directive is sufficient because it contains all the essential requirements needed. But the guide contains also many complementary information that could be of interest in case of doubt. You may ask your question, is this essential requirement relevant or not? In this case, you may have several answers within this guide for the application of the Machinery Directive. So the red part of this guide is a copy and paste of the Machinery Directive, and the black one contains comments related to this essential requirement from the Machinery Directive. So we will make now a short exercise with Aline. So Aline, let's begin our meeting now.
Okay, so as the secretary, of course, I have downloaded the last template of Annex Z corresponding to my project. Personally, I work with CEN, so it's on CEN-Bus, but we have also for CENELEC, the equivalency. And the table is part of the project. I have all the documents for supporting the experts and may show on the screen abstract on request. The convener, here Catherine, has her own copy of the draft, and I read the paragraphs of the Annex 1 of the directive, where are stated all the so-called essential safety requirements of the directive. So let's start the game now. Well, first, a use case of a covered essential safety requirements. It is 112. Just for your information, I passed 111. These are not requirements but definitions. Therefore, even if they are very useful for the understanding of the requirements, I have to start with 112. So let's read. The red box says, A, machinery must be designed and constructed so that it is fitted for its function and can be operated, adjusted, and maintained without putting persons at risk when these operations are carried out under the conditions foreseen, but also taking into account any reasonably foreseeable misuse thereof. And I read also B, C, D until E, and that says machinery must be supplied with all the special equipment and accessories essential to enable it to be adjusted, maintained, and used safely. Well, these requirements are very general, and indeed it is confirmed as specified in explanatory clause 173 below. At least we must refer to ISO 12100, which answers these general statements. Do you agree this is covered in the standard?
Yes, thank you, Aline, for having read this requirement. Yes, I remember the Machinery Sector Forum provided guidelines to introduce this essential requirement in Annex ZA. I think it's a special case. Oh yes, I remember now. A webinar was held on the 6th of October. And I will look at the replay. I could not participate to this webinar. Let's read the standard and check that the general statements are correctly addressed. So we have a general statement about principle of safety integration. Yes. So yes, this essential requirement is covered, and we can refer to clauses 4, 5, and 6 as stipulated in the instructions given on the CEN-Bus.
Yes. Okay, for 112, A, B, D, and E, we refer to 4, 5, and 6. But remember, we don't have B because it's not permitted. So it is done.
Okay.
Next one. So the next one, another case, which is here not relevant. Let's read anyway. 113, materials and products. The materials used to construct machinery or products used or created during its use must not endanger persons' safety or health. In particular, where fluids are used, machinery must be designed and constructed to prevent risks due to failing use, recovery, or draining. Is there any doubt regarding the use or creation of dangerous material?
So let's have a look. The machinery concerned by this project is an agricultural machinery. So I propose you as working group member, so this is my opinion, and so we have to share that together and to reach a consensus, is that this requirement is not relevant at all. Indeed, those machinery only manipulate straw and do not produce or use any dangerous material or products. Does everybody agree to that? Okay, no comment. Okay, so Aline, could you please add this statement into Annex Z?
Sorry, this
Why?
is not relevant, so I don't have to add this row to the table. Sorry.
Okay,
Next one.
Okay. Thank you.
So the next one, another example here of a not covered. 114, lighting. Machinery must be supplied with integral lighting suitable for the operations concerned where the absence thereof is likely to cause a risk despite ambient lighting of normal intensity. I think it is not relevant for trail machines. This is in the tractor, but see, the next paragraph is very interesting. Machinery must be designed and constructed so that there is no area of shadow likely to cause nuisance, that there is no irritating dazzle, and that there are no dangerous thrombostopic effects on moving parts due to the lighting. Internal parts requiring frequent inspection and adjustment and maintenance areas must be provided with appropriate lighting. I think in the guide, there are many explanations. If it is not clear for you, are there requirements relevant?
So on this kind of agricultural machinery, of course, as you said, machinery has to be inspected regularly and may operate also during night. But I remember that we did not reach any consensus on this issue. So I propose to note that it is not covered. So do you agree to that? Of course, we did not find any technical solution to answer this requirement to be integrated into the standard.
Okay, I see no objection. Lighting is not covered. So we have to add the row, lighting not covered. Next one.
So you had that in the third column, no?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
So that's the rule?
Yes, it is. Okay. Maybe another one. The next one, 115. I read it again. A design of machinery to facilitate its handling. Machinery or each component part thereof must be capable of being handled and transported safely. Be packaged or designed so that it can be stored safely and without damage and so on. Well, you can read on the screen what it is. I remember that we have discussed this in detail, this issue during the last meeting. As this requirement correctly dealt with, I propose to you to look again to the whole requirement 115 and see if something is missing in our project or if the requirement is correctly covered. What do you think?
Yes, I think it's a special case because, so let me search first the word handling into the standard. Oh yes, we wrote the handling of guards shall be taken into account during the design, in particular by limiting the mass of the parts to be handled to 25 kilograms by equipping them with griping means. So this aspect, of course, deal with handling. But I remember that we also indicate something else in another place of the standard. Oh yes, I remember. It's under the subclause on stability. Yes, look, it's in 4 to 6. So I read machinery fitted with wheels for manual displacement or traveling shall be designed in such a way as to prevent overturning. So I think that we can add those two subclauses as to cover this essential requirement.
Okay, so I add two subclauses, phase to 115, like that.
Yeah,
it is done.
Okay.
The next.
Perfect. So I think that we have found an optimized way of working, I mean, to deal with those items. Let's continue up to 6.5.
Yes. So we can say we have done it.
Okay.
So thanks, many thanks. Great job. We have completed the table, but sorry, it's not finished.
Why?
We have to verify that there is no missing clause or subclause in Annex Z. So let's take the draft and subclause after subclause, check that each requirement in the project correspond to an essential safety requirement of the directive and is correctly noted in the Annex Z.
So you mean we have to go in the contrary, in the other order? Huh?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's a double check. We have to do it. So can we say we have done it?
Yes, so it will take some time, but we will do it correctly.
So let's imagine we have done it. Congratulations for this hard work.
So we have to add an important warning. So as I said at the beginning, it's important to have this Annex ZA elaborated in the first stages of the draft. But the consequence of that is that it needs to be updated at each stage in order to be sure of two aspects. First, if you change the numbering of subclauses into the draft, so do not forget to implement in the same modification into Annex Z. And secondly, if you introduce a new subclause in the standard, you need also to introduce this element in Annex Z. Perhaps it corresponds to an essential requirement that was not covered before. So that's a check that also needs to be done within the life of the draft standard. Okay, so thank you very much for having listened to our webinar. Now we have a simple quiz to play with you. So else.
Yes, the first question is on screen now.
So you have a first question on the quiz. Is there any template?
Yes. Is there any template to fulfill?
Yes. So you have a question. Is there any template to fulfill? So now it's your turn.
Yes. We are waiting for the responses.
So we have half of the people who already have answered. So it was an easy question. Okay, so we still leave you 10 seconds to continue your answers. So is there any template to fulfill? First possibility, yes, it's only available to TC secretaries, or no, there is no template, or yes, it's available on CEN-BOSS and CENELEC BOSS.
So who is closing the question?
Yes, I'm closing the poll right now, and I will maybe also share with the attendees so that I can see the number of percentage that has been replied. Would have been nice to have asked that question before your presentation.
Okay, congratulations. So as explained by Joanna, Hugo, and Aline, all necessary elements are given on the box. And we also had the question at the beginning of this meeting in the chat, a person asking for the link to be given directly on the chat. So you have it. And of course, do not hesitate if you have any question and any doubt about the use of those tools. So a second question. So if a requirement is covered, what to do? So first of all, I had as many rows as there are numbers of subclauses in the standard. I do not add it because the content of the project is sufficient. I have the corresponding row in table of Annex ZA. Okay, so we'll let you 10 seconds more to answer this question. Okay, so we could have used the time taking also for this part of the webinar. It takes a lot of time also, as the same as to write an Annex Z. So, okay, thank you, Els. So, of course, the answer is 2. Oh no, sorry, it's a joke, it's a joke. So I give only one row into the table for one essential requirement. So I do not add as many rows as number of subclauses, but only one, and I add all the number of subclauses after the other. Perfect, 90% of good answers, very good. Next. So if a requirement is not relevant, what to do? So I had a row in the table and write not relevant in the third column, or I do not do anything in Annex Z. Okay, so we share the results. So we have 76% of people saying that I do not add anything in Annex Z, and 24% to say that I add a row in the table and I write not relevant. No, the correct answer is the second one. it is an aspect that has been changed in the last version of the template. Now the table only contains relevant requirements, and the word relevant has been added in the first column in the indent of the first column of the table. So if the table of Annex Z only contains relevant essential requirement for the type of machines covered by the standard. So that's very important.
Yes, that's important. You may, in the working group for the work, you may add it, but never transmit the document to CCMC. Never, ever.
Because you mean that you will never have the citation at the OJEU. Peter will say no.
Yes.
So the last question to you, and then we will answer your question. So if a requirement is not covered, what to do? So first, I try to implement the corresponding requirements in the project. Second, I do not do anything in Annex C. And third, I add a row in the table and write not covered in the third column. So so we see that we have about 170 answers. Okay, so let's share the results. So in your answers, you say for 39% of person, I try to implement the corresponding requirements in the standard. 19% I do not do anything in the Annex Z, and 67% I add a row in the table and write not covered in the third column. So as you saw, it was possible for this question to give several answers. And the first step is to try to implement the corresponding requirements into the project. But in some cases, the working group forgot one requirement, and standards have to cover as much essential requirements as possible. So it's important to make this double check, as Aline said also during the first part of our presentation. And if it's not possible, for example, no consensus on the topic, or this topic is not mature enough, then it shall be indicated not covered in the third column. So in this case, we had two good answers. The first one being the preferred one, and the third one, if it's not possible, then we had a row in the last column saying that it's not covered. So thank you very much for your participation, your attention, and I leave the floor to Els first.
Yes, thank you very much, both Catherine and Aline. I think many questions have been replied already in written by the others in the background, but there's still a few questions left. So I would like to invite maybe all of you to have a look and either indicate if you prefer to answer live right away or that you intend to write an answer to that question. I just would like to repeat to the audience that we will make a Q&A report available, meaning that you will have all the questions together with the answers in one single file. You will be informed when that is available. The same is true for the recording of this webinar and the presentation. Joanna, I see that one question is marked by you with the fact you want to answer. It says, if one essential requirement is not covered, the standard will not be listed. Tell us.
So I guess that this question relates to the listing in the OJEU, the citation. No, it is possible to not cover all essential requirements. I know, of course, very well that the aim of the technical bodies is to cover all the relevant essential requirements, but sometimes, as it was explained by my colleagues from AFNOR, this is not possible, or there is another good reason to not cover an essential requirement. Then again, if this is a relevant essential requirement for the product in the scope, then it is necessary to indicate it. And in the third column, in such a case, it is necessary to give the mention not covered. And then if you do this, it will be possible to cite the standard. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. I think that answers the question indeed. Any other ones that you would like to treat, or the others? Feel free to just unmute yourself and go and reply right away if you feel comfortable doing so.
Yes, on the comment from Mr. Margas, when it is not relevant, we have to do nothing. Nevertheless, on the working draft, it could be interesting to mention it initially, because we know this has been taken into account and it's not an oversight. I think that's an interesting way of working. And but please don't forget to delete that when you will submit it to the consultant. But it's an important way of working. I agree.
Yeah, I'd like to say a word. I saw a question that has just come in by Mr. Gnesini. Where he was also asking about the not applicable requirements and whether they are to be excluded. I'm not 100% sure whether I understand this correctly. So what we actually do is we distinguish between requirements that are applicable or relevant and have been covered, requirements that are relevant and have not been covered, and this is then explicitly written into the Annex ZA in the third column under not covered, and then requirements that are for whatever reason not relevant because they simply do not, and here's the word again, apply to the machine in question. And they, of course, they would be excluded from the Annex ZA, and then it can be useful to say something about them, maybe in the introductory part, as Catherine has just outlined. So I don't know whether that answers the question, Mr. Gnesini's answer. If not, please let us know, and I'll try to go a bit deeper into that.
Okay, thank you, Frank. I see one question on, do CEN and CENELEC cross-check the essential requirements quoted in an Annex Z of a standard before publication? Joanna, you can shed some light on that.
So our production team deals with many different sectors there is a big number of the directives. Each of them is different, so it is not feasible for them to cross-check all this. So this is in principle the responsibility of the technical body to double-check, as my colleagues explained, that the content of the table is correct. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see that Mr. Gnezini added some remarks in relation to his previous question.
So may I answer to the point from Adrian Sharman?
Of course.
The agricultural machinery, we gave this example. It was only because we wanted to illustrate a not relevant requirement, but of course we did not study into detail such equipment, and it was only for the use case of this meeting. Sorry if we forgot this aspect.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions that you would like to treat today? Joanna, I can see you, but I cannot hear you.
No, I see there is one. Sorry for that.
Okay.
Is it now good?
Yes.
So there is. Thank you. So there is one question from Mr. Haibach. Why should I add not covered in the third row? Question before it was wrong to indicate not covered in the third column. So I don't remember to which part of the presentation, I guess from my colleagues from AFNOR, this question refers to, but I guess the reason is that given essential requirement was not relevant, probably. I don't know which part of the presentation it is about, but I guess this is the reason. Thank you.
Yes, and maybe I can take the opportunity to ask Mr. Stephen Carter to a little bit elaborate on the question, because I have a hard time understanding the question. But what will happen with the new regulation is that there will be a few new essential requirements. So they will have to be taken on board once standardization efforts will take place to cover or to address the machinery regulation, the new one. But the general concept of the Annex Z will be the same. So if the, how to say it, approach becomes more commonly implemented, then it should not change the landscape again for you when we go from the directive to the regulation. At least I hope that that answers your question. So the idea is that the concept will remain true to what is being discussed right now. But as I said, there will be additional health and safety requirements. They can, of course, not be automatically covered because they don't exist right now for the moment. Just to, I would say, make you to explain from our side that we are trying to work on a way, is maybe the best way to say it, to ensure that we will have a seamless transition between the current system and the new system. without an extraordinary effort to all of a sudden having to change something. So I have to admit it takes a little bit of ingenuity on our side too. But that's was something that we will really strive to do, so that once the quote unquote, well, I should do two hands, of course, quote unquote, if the directive stops to apply and the new regulation starts to apply, that the harmonized standards can transition from the old directive into the new regulation. Now, I have to say this with one caveat. It's not yet signed, sealed, and delivered, so I have to speak with a little bit of reservation here. But this is absolutely the direction that we intend to take. And yeah, with this, I think, again, to come back to the question, is that it should, in theory, not take a new webinar to explain all new rules. So I hope this is a little bit of a clarification. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I think it is, so I hope it's also the case for the person who asked the question. Okay, any other questions? I see we still have a few questions in the list. As I said at the beginning of this webinar, we do not promise to be able to answer all the questions either today because of time constraints, but that's not really the case, but also because some of the questions are a bit more complicated to reply. And I think the speakers need some time to discuss amongst them in order to have a correct and full reply to that question. So if your question remained unreplied, apologies, but we do promise to come back with you with an answer via the Q&A report that we make available on the website.
I just spotted one by Giovanni Zanetti. I find quite interesting, and I may have an answer to it actually. So because he's asking, maybe I've not well understood, but if an essential health and safety requirement has several requirements, that is indents, and for instance, one of them is not covered, shall it be written, what shall be written in the third column? And here I would like to actually, how should I say, make reference to my second life as chairman in some pressure equipment groups, where we quite frequently have this in our Annex 1 there. And here, in fact, we subdivide our Annex ZA, that is the entries in the first column of the Annex ZA, into something like saying essential safety requirement 1433, first indent, second indent, and third indent, and then in fact would probably say, okay, first indent with the corresponding clause of the standard, second indent also, and if the third indent for some good reason is not covered, one would then say not covered. So yes, you would try to subdivide the essential safety requirements even a little bit further, actually, in that particular case. It doesn't happen very often, I believe, but it may happen, you're right. And then we would go like that. Yes, you would subdivide them into section, subsection, and maybe even saying first or second indent if you need to make that distinction between covered and not covered.
Okay, thank you, Frank. I see that Peter is still writing an answer to one of the questions in the list, but I would like to propose to close down here the Q&A moment. I know that we're a bit before the timing, but that is always better, I think, personally, than to be too late and to close down the webinar later than planned. We keep the Q&A open should you still have questions, of course, but I would like to invite Mr. Frank Woensland for the closing remarks of this webinar, because if I'm not mistaken, you have prepared some closing words.
Yes, I did, as a matter of fact. Thank you, Els. So, as many of you may have seen, there are at this moment 13 questions open, and be assured we'll try to address all of them. The fact that we didn't do it immediately is sometimes that while the questions are sometimes quite short, they can be, the answers can be quite complex. And as we want to give you good answers, please don't take it personally if we didn't answer them right now, right from the start, but it may take some time to give a decent answer to them, but we will come back to all of you actually. So I'd like to take this occasion to say a big thank you to the presenters of today's seminar. A big thank you to Els Sommers also and her colleagues from CEN CENELEC who made the whole event happen and made sure that we did not experience any technical problems. At least I did not. I hope so. The same for you. And of course, a big thanks to all of you on the screens for your attention and also your very constructive questions, which will keep some of us quite busy in the next couple of hours or maybe days. In general, I can say I'm aware that some of the rules that were presented today may appear to be quite formal to some of you. But I have to admit many, if not most of these aspects are really essential. Our house consultants, they have to follow rather strict rules and boundary conditions. And this is mainly to guarantee an effective and efficient process. So for that reason, every inconsistency can lead to delays in the whole project. But as you saw, the tools are there. There's no big need to really modify these formal tools. And always keep in mind, of course, we are all humans. And so if there is an obvious formal non-compliance, this will usually every one of us lead into thinking that maybe some other aspects are not really in line as they should be. Joanna and Hugo, they explained very clearly and nicely, in my opinion, some of the main traps we could step into. So I would only like to encourage you to feel free to take the document, which will be made available in PDF afterwards, to take this document as an additional guidance also, in addition to the documents that you also find on CEN BOSS anyway. So again, also big thanks also to Aline and Catherine for their very nice presentation of a practical example, how to set up an Annex ZA. As you could see, you have to think a bit further than only to make a blind list of all the things that you have addressed in your standard. Actually, as you saw in the very end, you may have to check whether all clauses that you wrote in your standard match something that is written in the Machinery Directive. So also their handout, I think, is a very, very good guidance paper, even if it is focused on a special machine, because we really wanted to give a practical example how to set this up. So I hope that this will also be able to help you in drafting your Annex ZA. I hope we also could sufficiently answer those questions that were answered during the session now. And as I said, be assured we will certainly address the remaining ones, also the ones that you may ask in the coming minutes. I'd like to thank you very much for your attention and interest. And from my side, I wish you all a nice Thursday today. Yes, a nice Thursday afternoon. A lot of success in your standardization work and in your drafting of Annex ZA. Stay healthy. It was a big pleasure having you with us. And goodbye from my side. Thank you so much.